Hey everyone, just quick announcement before I share today's episode with Reid Talbott. Reid is doing some really amazing work and I'm excited for him to get to share his story. But just want to take a minute to share the release of my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. It's a cute book with bright pictures that follows a toddler on her trip to the chiropractor. It shows her excitement and how she knows that it impacts her health in a positive way. And each purchase of the book will be supporting a project that I started called the Unlock Wellness Project. For each purchase of the book, we will be donating a wellness bag to a child in need. These wellness bags will include non-toxic, chemical-free essentials such as soap, shampoo, toothpaste, a toothbrush, items that a lot of the times children in tough situations don't have access to. You can learn more about the book and about the Unlock Wellness Project by going to drkaseyjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the Shop tab, then click the Children's Book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video with more information. You can also purchase the book directly on Amazon.com by searching Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. But I hope you guys love the book. Be sure to check out my website to learn more, and thank you so much for the support. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Reid Talbott. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Reid Talbott, and Reid is the owner of Commit Fitness, but his story doesn't just start there. He had to overcome many obstacles to get where he is today, and I'm excited for him to share his story and just hope his perseverance inspires you guys just to chase after whatever dream you guys have in your life. So I'm excited for him to share his story. So Reid, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you.
Thanks, Dr. Casey. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to tell my story.
Yeah, and just quick shout out to Lindsay Brewer. She connected us, and she was a past podcast guest on episode 22. So go check out her episode as well. But no, I'm just really glad Lindsay connected us.
Me too. Yeah. She's been a good friend of mine now for a little while. We like to hang out by the pool together, actually.
It's awesome. But yeah, no, Reid, so let's just jump into your backstory. I know it was a crazy ride to get where you are right now. So just kind of, just walk us through, your story and just how all of that led to you starting Commit Fitness.
Yeah, sure. So back in 2010, I tried college for the first time and decided it wasn't the proper route, and I enlisted in the Army. I knew that I wanted to be in the military since I was a real young kid. It was my lifelong dream. And so I went to Georgia and I went through basic training with no problem. And then I went into airborne school, which is where you get to jump out of planes, which I absolutely love, anything that has to do with adrenaline. So it was right up my alley. And on my fourth jump, I landed wrong. I had hit straight down on the ground on my heels. And I knew I was injured, but I didn't know how bad. But I had a goal that I was trying to get into the Ranger selection program. And so I wasn't stopping for anything. So I got up and got off the field. And I remember telling my buddy next to me, his name's Farneski. And I said, Farneski, on the next jump, you got to come find me. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to walk off the field. And he said, all right, man, I got you. No problem. We did a night jump later that day. So jumped blind and landed it. And I was actually okay. I mean, it hurt, but I moved on. I ended up going into the Ranger selection program, and about a week later, I was just in so much pain and I wasn't performing at 100%. And we were doing some serious activity. You had to be able to run 5 miles in a sub 7-minute pace, and it was just very intense, which again, I love that kind of stuff.
But were you in pain during that stuff and just pushing through, or was it at that point, it was kind of like, just a little bit and you just fought through it?
It was definitely probably the most severe pain I've ever experienced. Really? Yeah. Even throughout the week, getting up and down was one of the hardest tasks to possibly do. Just laying down on my stomach was the only position I could find any sense of relief. But again, I had a goal and I wasn't about to let anything stop me. I was 19 at the time and just ready to go. And so a week later, I went to the doctor, and this guy was actually a spinal expert. And he put me through a series of tests, and he came to the conclusion that I'd probably broke my tailbone. So during the x-ray for my tailbone, they actually caught that I had broken 2 vertebrae in my back. I had crushed my T12 and split my T11 in half.
That's insane. Oh, I mean, you're just so lucky that it wasn't worse. I mean, I am a chiropractor, so like I hear that and man, I just cringe because like so much wrong could have happened from pushing through that.
Absolutely, absolutely. When he told me, my jaw just dropped. There was no way in my mind that I had broke my back. That didn't even cross my mind. It wouldn't make sense. How was I able to do these things? But perseverance, like you said, and um, so I went through about 7 months of physical therapy, and that was fantastic. It actually really, really helped me get familiar with the pool and learn how to swim appropriately. And I was discharged 9 months after I had received the injury. So it was a real shot to my ego. I lost my childhood dream, and without any doing of my own.
Mhm.
And that's hard. That's a tough thing to deal with, especially at 20 years old. I came back to Tucson at that point. Excuse me, I'd take a step back. While I was waiting to get discharged, I had a lot of free time on my hand, and I knew that I was going to have to find a career outside of the military, and I didn't know what to do other than the fact that I wanted to work for myself. So I decided business was the route to go. So I started to study up on business law. I would go to the library. I would just pick up a book and read as much as I possibly could over the 9 months. So then I came back home to Tucson. I decided I wanted to start a climbing gym here in Tucson. And there's only one here, so I figured it'd be a good market for it. There's a very, very large group of people here that climb outside. And so I thought it would be a good avenue approach. But I didn't have anything. I didn't have any assets. I didn't own a car. I didn't have any money. I was
Right. I mean, you're young to start a business.
very young.
Yeah, because you're still
Yeah.
like learning how even to make that possible.
I had no clue, Dr. Casey. I had no clue. But that didn't stop me. And I had a mentor at the time, and he basically told me what I was trying to do was far fetched. And at 21, that's a hard thing to hear, especially with something that you're trying to develop and have spent a decent amount of time on. So I decided to go and travel and visit as many climbing gyms as I could. So I filled up my backpack and I flew to the East Coast. I didn't have a car. I knew only a handful of people on the East Coast. So I would hitchhike, take buses, take trains, whatever I needed to. And I visited a number of different states and visited a number of different gyms to find the inspiration of how I should actually operate my business.
Do you think that like with the mentor telling you that you wish that wouldn't have happened, or are you kind of glad that it did because of the experience you learned from traveling from gym to gym?
In hindsight, I definitely am glad that he did that. When it happened, I was upset. I was, again, 21. I felt like he didn't respect what I was trying to do just based on my age. And that's tough, as a young man to deal with. So I continued to push, and I came back home and again started to try to open a climbing gym, still with no money, no assets. But I developed another business plan. We're talking the old school business plans where they're 75 pages to 100 pages
Right.
long.
Right.
I had no formal education other than what I had read in the library, and the books are from the 60s and 70s probably. And but I was doing what I knew, and that's all that mattered to me. And I had built up another group of mentors, and I started to sit with investors, and once again was basically told that it was a far-fetched idea. I was asking for a lot of money with nothing on my end. And most people look at you when you do that and think you're silly, which I understand now, again, in hindsight. So I decided to sell everything I owned. I sold my bed, I sold my couch, my TV, and I put everything I owned other than that, which was my camping gear, my climbing gear, and a little bit of food in my truck. And I drove to California. I had no plan. Again, I was just searching for inspiration. I was searching for what I wanted to continue to do with my life.
Why California?
Because I'd been to the East Coast, so I figured it was time for the West Coast.
Just switching it up.
Yeah, it was simple as that. I decided to visit a friend, and she's quite an avid traveler too, which was helpful. And I ended up looking up a job ad as a personal trainer, which I had done prior to the military. And it was virtually the only marketable skill I had at this point. Jumping out of planes is not a very marketable skill in the civilian world. I applied for the job. I got the job, but I actually turned it down because I wasn't done traveling yet. And I ended up homeless in San Francisco, begging for money, no food. I was living off of maybe a peanut butter and jelly a day. It was a very, very tough time. But I personally chose to do that. I want to make that clear. My parents have always been supportive of me and always wanted the best for me. I remember my dad telling me, he's like, listen, son, I will never help you go farther on your travels, but I will always bring you home. And that always allowed me peace of mind on my travels, which was very
right, because you had at least a way out if that was necessary.
Correct. Yeah. But I wanted to see how far that I was willing to take it. And I think that you have to do that in order to find inspiration sometimes.
What was the hardest part whenever, like, you said that you kind of were living like that homeless lifestyle? Like, what were ways that you had to adapt? Like, what was the hardest part of that whole situation?
The hardest part, I would say, would be finding a place to sleep. The campgrounds out there are relatively expensive. I was camping just north of San Francisco, and you're only allowed to stay out there for a number of days. And, the park rangers aren't very friendly when you overstay your welcome.
Are those free? The ones you're talking about?
Were they free? No, they were pay per day.
Oh, okay.
Campsites,
Okay.
Yeah.
So even if you pay, there's still a time limit?
Correct. Yeah, there was 3-day time limit on each campsite, and there was only about 3 campsites. And I spent about a month looking for locations to sleep. So there was one time where I slept behind an old Best Buy that had shut down. I remember sleeping on a park bench one day, and you find what you're comfortable with, and you learn really quick what you're not comfortable with. And I think that's good to know about yourself during stuff like that.
Yeah. Were there any like scary situations that came from that? Because I mean, obviously you're, in a city and like, just as far as safety wise.
I wouldn't say on my travels to California there was any times, but on the East Coast, again, I didn't have any place to sleep or stay. And I remember I was in Albany, New York, and I had missed the bus. So I ended up sleeping at the bus station, and it was about 2 a.m. and I'm in downtown Albany, and there's shady characters all around, and I have this big old backpack on me, and it's just, I look like an easy target. I look tired as hell, and it was hard. And that was a very uncomfortable experience. I remember I actually tied my backpack to my leg so that if anybody had tried to take it while I fell asleep, that I would know.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I can't imagine what that would feel like. Just the uncertainty of, you just don't know what other people are going to do, and then if you're in a place you're not familiar with. But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm just can't imagine like all of the things that you did learn about yourself and about your personality, and just again coming back to perseverance. Like, it all just ties in together.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting going from that situation in Albany. I remember a situation in San Francisco. It was actually the first day I had held up a cardboard sign to ask for help. And that was probably one of the most humbling experiences of my life, because I was now basing my entire life off the generosity of others.
Right.
That was scary.
Was the generosity, like, I mean, did that help a lot? Like, were you surprised about the people that did help?
Yeah. Believe it or not, I actually made more than minimum wage begging for money on the street.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think that changed? I mean, I'm sure it would have to, like, when you see people now with the sign, as opposed to how you probably viewed that, years before. I mean, just that change in like that, just that mindset shift for you, like you just have more empathy, and like, how has that changed that in your mind, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I absolutely know what you're talking about. It totally did change my perception on it. So now if I do see a homeless person begging for money on the side of the street, I may give them something on the first time, and it's typically food. When I was homeless, that was the biggest thing I wanted, was food. And I remember this woman came up to me and talked to me for about 15 minutes and was so regretful she didn't have anything to give to me. And she came back about a half hour later and handed me probably the smallest tangerine you can imagine. And I almost broke down into tears, because that tangerine meant more to me than a $10 bill.
Right. Yeah.
It was very unusual. Very unusual. Yeah. It makes you appreciate the little things. Let me tell you that.
I'm sure. So, you're in California, and you don't have a place to sleep and a place to stay. So, and you're still like going through your travel. So what kind of happened from there?
Well, I was still applying to jobs, and I knew I needed a place to live. So I ended up going on a Craigslist when I was sitting at Starbucks one day, and I would actually use Starbucks as my shower. I would go into the bathroom and scrub up a little bit, and then sit and use their internet. And there was an ad on there for somebody to do maintenance on a building in exchange for rent. They had a basement apartment in North Beach, San Francisco, and I didn't know anything about San Francisco. I didn't know how much the rent was. I didn't. I was clueless. But I ended up meeting with her, and I would do either the Starbucks bathroom shower, or I would use baby wipes to clean up for these interviews. And I met with her, and she and I got along really well. I decided actually to leave San Francisco a day after that interview. And I went up to a place called Glass Beach because a friend had told me that I must go there for her. It's a very unusual place. A landfill had fell into the ocean and it churned up all the glass. And now the whole beach is just covered in these smooth pieces of glass.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's very pretty. But I got an email from her later that day. And I mean, I had my head on my steering wheel. I had no money. I had nowhere to sleep. I was in this town that nobody wanted to help me. And I got an email from her saying, I hope you didn't leave San Francisco yet. I would really like to work with you. And I told her if she let me move in the following day, I would come back to San Francisco. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I would get there somehow, some way.
Right.
And she told me that I could move in that following Sunday. And so I had $28 left to my name, and I put it all in my gas tank, and I made it to that apartment complex on E. I had probably maybe 20 or 30 miles left in the gas tank.
That's crazy.
You know?
That's awesome.
It really was. And I had a half a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter. That's all I had to my name. But I got an apartment in San Francisco. And this was a great place. It had a living room, a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a bed. That's all I needed at that point. I just wanted a hot shower and maybe a piece of bread. And so once I moved into the apartment complex, I figured out what I had to do, and it was 9 hours of work a week. That was it. It was pretty easy. And I had done maintenance in the past, growing up. I did it with my dad, and at different restaurants, I've been the maintenance supervisor. And so the next day I was like, all right, I need to get a job. And I walked into Starbucks, and they gave me a job that day, which was I was so grateful. And I started a week later. Yeah. And I was finally getting back on my feet.
Yeah. So really you went from showering there to working there. So you're familiar with the bathroom.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. So you started working there, and then how did that progress?
I worked there for about 3 months, and I was dating this girl at the time in California, and she basically told me that in order to have an adult relationship, I needed to have less of a vagabond type lifestyle, which I totally understood. So I, at the time, again, jumped to conclusions all the time, made decisions sporadically, and I decided to leave back home 2 days later. I put in my resignation at Starbucks. I emailed the apartment complex and said, hey guys, thank you, but I have to go. And so I returned back to Tucson after a 17-hour drive, which was pretty brutal. And again, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I just knew I needed to get home and get established to move my life forward.
Right.
And it was a good push in the right direction. It was a very good push in the right direction.
No, that's awesome. And so you're living with your parents then at that point?
Correct. Yes. Okay. I moved back to my parents. I came back to Tucson because it's where I had my support system, and I knew I was going to need that in order to start a business, especially with no money to my name. So
at that point, were you did you have an idea of kind of where you wanted to go? You knew you liked the outdoors, you knew you liked fitness, that kind of thing, and back to the climbing gym? Or at that point were you like, I have no idea, back to the drawing board?
It was basically back to the drawing board, and I decided to take a different direction. Instead of a climbing gym, I started to design climbing gear. And I had been doing this for a number of years, but never put it into practical application. And I realized once again that because I had no assets or capital, that I was not going to be able to do that. And so I returned to the drawing board and said, okay, what are my skills that I currently have that can progress things forward? And personal training was the only thing that I'd done prior to the military that was easier to get a certification, that cost less money, that I could actually market rapidly. And so I decided to start outside boot camp classes. I had 2 friends, and I asked both of them, I said, hey guys, I'm going to start a boot camp. Would you guys like to do it with me? And my good friend Marcus, who I grew up with, he said, yes, man, it's time to change my life. I want you to help me. And I was like, all right, Marcus, let's do this. And so I started to train Marcus. And after about a month of just Marcus coming 3 days a week at 5:30 in the morning, I started to build some clientele. And I took that from just Marcus to 37 clients in about 6 months.
No, that's great.
Yeah. And so I realized that I was finally building a business. And, I had registered for my LLC right at the beginning of all this. And, because I had studied business law while I was waiting to get discharged from the military, I knew the proper steps to take. And I am not one to bend the moral fibers. So I knew I wanted to do it the appropriate way. Mm-hmm. And then after I had gained the 37 clients, I decided, all right, let's take it to the next level. How do I do that? And I realized instead of trying to sell to a bunch of individuals, which is very difficult to do, I need to go to the source of the individuals. So I started with an apartment complex. I said, all right, I'll come in and you guys provide this service to all of your residents, and I'll come in and teach the classes. You guys pay me and your residents are happier. You'll have more people come in. And I remember that the first apartment complex I went to, again, I was only 22 at the time. He treated me like a child, and it was really a bummer because I had all these experiences and felt like an adult, but I wasn't treated like one. And that was hard, starting a business doing that. And he took my price point, from what I had, and he was giving me scraps. And I said, man, I know my value, and I'm not going to do that for you. And so I had to move on. And it was hard at first, possibly having this really large contract come through and having to say no. And I think in business, that is one of the hardest decisions to make, is to know when to say no.
Right. And also, respecting the gut intuition of, what's right and wrong. There's a difference between earning more experience or if you just know a situation's not right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think most people don't listen to their gut enough this day and age. I think they follow whatever the stream says to go. And I think that's a wrong way to run things, especially business. Right. You got to trust yourself.
It's not a fast fix. It would have been easy to take all of the easy stuff because it's quick, easy money, so to say. But
right.
but more long-term of where you were trying to take it, it didn't make the most sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so after that, I took one day to allow myself to feel the pity. And then I was like, all right, it's time to move on. And I moved to I had met this gentleman, and he runs a indoor sports center here where they train young kids and adults how to play soccer. And I went to him. They have this great facility. And again, price point was an issue. I was asking too much, and he didn't want to give me that much. And yeah, we had talked, and he's a great business guy. And so we understood where each other were coming from, and we decided that it wouldn't be the best suited application for either of our programs. But now we have a great relationship. We can sit and have a coffee and really enjoy a good conversation about business and discuss and try to help each other understand where we're taking our businesses. And if we can help each other, we try to, which is great about business. You make some relationships that you would never have expected in the past. That's one of my favorite things about it.
Right. Just the networking aspect of it, and just what you can learn from each other and take that and apply it to what you're doing.
Absolutely. And there's so much to learn from these people that they have a lot more experience running business than I do. So having people like that to go to and say, hey, I'm having an issue here. What would you suggest I do? That's so beneficial, especially as a young business owner. I'm not formally educated. And so having these resources and friends that respect what I'm doing and I respect what they're doing, it's so cool. And we really build upon that in this life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you started, so obviously you got kind of turned down with your price for those first few. Did you actually start to adjust the prices, or did you just kind of keep asking until you found that first client that you were kind of in full agreement with? Or how did that all kind of work out?
Yeah, I actually had kept the prices pretty much the same as what I was charging for the outside boot camp classes. And I really didn't want to change that price point because I was still running my boot camps outside. And I knew if I was going to charge less somewhere else, I would have to charge less for my clients. And that's how I felt, at least. And
yeah, well, it's like a moral issue. I mean, you don't want, Susie that works over here to hear that her friend's paying less because she's going to just a different class. It's just, you just don't know how that can impact your business long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and Tucson's relatively small. It's about 600,000 people, which I know sounds big, but everybody knows each other here, and word spreads really fast. So I wanted to stay away from that. And I decided to continue doing my boot camp classes, and I developed a relationship with a gentleman named Nate Perez. And he's been a great mentor to me. He's ran a few businesses in the IT world on his own for the last 10 years. And he introduced me to a gentleman named Wade Hamstra. And Wade had just built a new facility for their company, and they do heating and cooling. And in their new facility, they had actually put a 900 square foot gym on site. And it was really cool. And I had met him, I think, 2 months after the building had been created. And he said, hey, in 2 months, I want you to come check the facility out and see if you can help me develop a health and wellness program for my company. I know nothing about it. It sounds like you know a lot about it. Let's see if we can do something together. So without even knowing that I was trying to do this, he brought me right in, which was so cool. And I think a lot of that, he was 33 at the time. And I think he realized that it is very tough at a young age to start a business. And he knew I had a decent head on my shoulders. And again, the moral fiber was there. He saw that. We have a great relationship now. I've been with them for about 2 years, just over 2 years. And so I went into this company and immediately started doing classes. After I saw the facility, we started doing classes 2 weeks later, which just, I was amazed, and
Yeah, it's
I
just
had this.
cool how things fall into place, like when it's the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And business evolves whether you want it to or not. And it's going to take directions that you may not know about. And you have to be ready to change with that if need be, or say no.
Hmm.
Again, trusting that gut. And I knew this was the direction I wanted to go. So we started doing fitness classes over there. We were doing group classes and one-on-one classes. And I was doing 34 classes a week at Hamstra. I was doing an additional additional 9 classes of my boot camp at the same time. And I was working about 80 hours a week, trying to figure out what I'm doing. I wasn't sure exactly what this company that I was providing services to wanted. So it was a real steep learning curve.
Hmm.
And so, I started to help these clients. I had actually helped a client over the first year at Hamster lose over 100 pounds. And
That's
he
awesome.
his name is Big John, and he's 6'7".
Not anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
He towers over everybody, and he really wanted to change his life. And I was so happy to help him and be able to help him do that. And I realized that just fitness wasn't enough for what I wanted to accomplish with this company. So I started to look at different avenues of approach. And I started to look into, okay, how can I actually affect different types of diseases at the workplace? Now, I did this because I knew that if we impacted different types of diseases, we'd be able to save them on insurance premiums.
Right. And I mean, obviously that's a good, obviously that's, you're trying to help people get healthier, but when you're talking to like a business owner to try to incorporate these things, like if they hear things like that, that's just obviously they want their employees to be healthier, but if they hear something like that, it's just such more of an incentive and saves them money and keeps them at work, like less sick days, less injuries. You don't lose from whenever you really learn the facts of what can really be, benefited from doing that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I knew that in order to actually be able to make sales to future companies, that I would have to have some information in order to give them a return on their investment. That's the biggest thing when it comes down to it for business is money. And I understand that they want to help their employees, but it also has to be beneficial to their bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not, then what's the point of the program other than helping their employees? Now, I aim at helping smaller companies. I look at companies that are 250 employees and smaller. The smaller companies are realizing that in order to compete with the big name companies, that they have to treat their employees better. So they're much more likely to be curious about very, very in-depth health and wellness programs. So I started to research about diabetes, prediabetes, heart disease, hypertension, obesity, and anxiety disorders, and how fitness actually impacts these if you spend enough time doing them. And I eventually, it took me almost 2 years to build the proper ROI, which is the return on the investment, and reflect it appropriately. Saying that I can help with these diseases reflects only as a soft cost saving, which means no money is actually saved, but it's potentially saved.
Right.
I had to turn that into a hard cost savings. And I finally was able to do that over a period of time. And that's all it takes is time. With fitness, it's about consistency. With nutrition, it's about consistency. It's about doing it repeatedly and really, truly making a lifestyle change. And that's
Absolutely.
what I try to sell these people is the motivation, the accountability, and a lifestyle change.
Right. And it forms a community within the office place. If somebody's just doing one of these things on their own and, you're the only person that's bringing a smoothie to work and working out during lunch, it's harder to kind of keep that sustainable when the rest of your coworkers are, going to happy hour at lunch. But when you're doing it as an office and as a community, you can really, just make it sustainable and just make it part of your everyday routine.
100%, 100%. And I couldn't agree more. And we've actually had 50% participation at this company or more since we've started, which is unheard of when it comes to health and wellness programs. And it's fantastic. The group classes, everybody is suffering together. And, there's something to be said about that. It really builds camaraderie. And the best part about that is, the vice president, the president of the company actually take the classes as well. That's
cool.
Something I require when I sell it is that the high-end employees, they must be involved so that everybody, when they come into that room, they're on the same playing field and the trainer's in charge at that point. And that makes them feel so much more comfortable going into the office and saying, hey, boss, I have an issue. Can we talk about it? And it
Right.
just, again, it really builds that culture in the company.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same like concept as if you're like on an athletic team and you suffer
Hmm.
together and you work out together and like you just use the bond that you form from that. Like if somebody doesn't, if somebody has never played a sport, like you don't understand that. But
Right.
if you're part of a group sport, like because you do suffer together day in, day out, like you really do form a closer bond and it's more like a family. So
Absolutely.
that's cool. So I love that the level playing field. That's awesome.
Yeah, so do I. And and when they come into the room, the president of the company is no longer the boss. Again, the
Right.
trainer is, and yeah,
They can all
everybody
laugh
loves
at
that.
him dying. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and they're
Right.
all sweating together, and maybe crying a little bit together, and it's wonderful. And as a trainer, I've been a trainer now for a number of years, and it is tough when you have a group class where you have John Doe who can't do certain exercises maybe because of previous injuries, and then you
Hmm.
have Jane Smith who has been an athlete for most of her life and wants that push. So as a trainer, learning how to bring both of those people in the same class and get them the workout that they need has been a real good experience for me in just learning people.
Yeah, and how to modify it, make it doable for everybody. No, that's very true. So with that, like, is that when you started just to because you were getting all of the success from jumping in with your friend? Is that when you actually started like it was like commit fitness and really started marketing yourself that way, or was that after you made the material?
It's been Commit Fitness since day one when I started
Okay,
the boot camp. And
gotcha.
my business is actually Commit LLC, and then I have a subsidiary of Commit Fitness. And that way, in the future, if I decide I want to do more climbing stuff, I can do Commit Climb or
Gotcha.
so on and so forth. Commit Football, whatever the sport may be. And
That's
that
awesome.
was the ability to grow. I think is really important when you start a business and having that vision and being able to see that the potential is there. So once I realized that the ROI was there, that I had a marketable skill and a program, I decided to expand it. And then I brought in a registered dietitian, and her, myself, and another health coach. We put together about a 30-page packet, and it's a step-by-step process for any individual to be able to understand. It's very similar to macros, but broken down a little bit easier so that people can understand. They don't have to have a scale. They can do it just by the packaging on the food, which is, again, simplicity helps a ton when people are trying to get into fitness, especially if they've never been doing it before.
No, definitely. And I know you dive into, I mean, like full wellness. And I think it's interesting because part of your program also includes financial fitness. Do you want to
Correct.
kind of talk about that a little bit? Because that's not something that you hear about a lot within a wellness program.
Absolutely. Finances is something that I've personally struggled with for a long period of my life, and I'm, finally getting on track now. And I realized that it's one of the biggest stressors in life. And I knew that when people are stressed, it's just hard. They don't want to work out, and then they choose to eat crappy food. So I was like, all right, if I know this is beneficial for me, it's probably beneficial for the average individual. And so about 4 months ago, I reached out to a friend of mine who's been conducting tax classes and financial classes for almost 10 years. And I said, Daniel, I would like you to come in. I want to hire you as a subcontractor to teach a 2-hour financial class once a month. It'll be open to all the employees and their families, and you'll teach the class. I'll pay you. And it's been successful so far. We're still building on the participation of that because it's a newer edition. We've only done 3 classes so far, but I'm really excited to see where that goes.
No, I think it's awesome. And I mean, yeah, the whole stress aspect of it, I mean, it needs full attention. I mean, like you were saying, obviously if you're stressed and you don't feel great and you eat bad, but also the effects that it has on the actual body, like on a cellular level, like I mean, it impacts you hard. I mean, it's
Yeah.
extremely important to be aware of. So no, I love that you have added that aspect in, and I'm excited to hear how that goes as you start to do it even more. You'll have to keep me posted on that.
Yeah, absolutely will. And what's great about doing it at this company is he backs my plays 100%, the president of the company, which is so helpful. He really is encouraging the employees to be involved in this. And so we're slowly seeing a rise in the participation, which is great. But it's also a fear thing. A lot of people who have money issues don't want to admit that they have money issues because it
Right.
can be embarrassing. And
Yeah.
so I'm finding a struggle there of being able to bridge that gap.
Mhm.
But again, business is being able to modify and roll with the punches, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. And yeah, so do you have anything happening in the future that you want to, share with the audience? Maybe something that you're working on or something new that Commit Fitness is trying to do in the future?
Well, the next step for Commit Fitness would be growth, absolutely growth, and reaching out to more companies in Tucson. I've been trying to work with a few, and I'm running into more struggles. And this is probably because I don't have a formal education. I'm learning how larger corporations run themselves. I've had a couple of interested companies, but they're national companies, and as a single person running the company, it's tough for me to know exactly what they want. Not only that, they typically will have a specific budget for the entire year, and they decide a program, they buy the program, and that's it. They're done. And so going to them in the middle of the year, they're basically saying, all right, we really can't talk about this until January of the start of the next fiscal year. And so it's a lot of hurry up and wait. And I'm trying to learn patience as much as I can with business. And, I would love to grow the company fast, but there's a lot of facets that I'm still learning. But yeah, growth would be the next step for Commit Fitness. As far as growing into other programs, maybe eventually, I would love to be able to have some yoga classes. I think yoga can be really meditative and helpful to the person's spirit.
Right. Just add it on to the whole de-stress component of what you're trying to do.
Exactly. And the way I run the business is that the company can actually pick and choose what parts of the program they want. Now, of course, I have a package that's fully encompassing, and that's the best route, in my opinion. But it's beneficial no matter what the company wants to do.
Got it. And what do you think the chances are of the climbing gym happening? Because now I want that to happen for you.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe at some point down the road, if I decide to hang up the Commit Fitness, I'll open up a climbing gym.
That's cool. I've never been to one. There's a few. There's a handful in Florida, though. I'm sure it would be pretty cool to check out.
It's a totally different type of fitness. I really suggest anybody who's interested in fitness to try climbing, even if it is just in the gym. I've been a climber for about 7 years, and I prefer outside. That's where I like to climb. There's something about touching real rock that's a little different than the gym. But the gym, it's a great workout. And if I were to open a gym, it would not just be a climbing gym, but actually a fully encompassing fitness center as well with a yoga studio. Nice. That's what I've always visioned, at least.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Maybe one day.
No, yeah. I think you will. And I just love what you're doing. I love how you're really embracing just the person as a whole, because it's not just one component. It's a lot of components. And I love what you're doing, Reid. And what's the best way for people to follow you on social media? Your website, just the best way for people just to keep up with what you're doing and just stay up to date.
Yeah. On the website, I have links to both social media, the Facebook and the Instagram. I post pretty regularly on there. So yeah, that would be the best way for people to get in contact or see what I'm doing.
Cool. And what's the website right off?
Yeah, it's commitfitness.squarespace.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
Instagram is commit.fitness. And if you search for commit.fitness on Facebook as well, you'll find it. And we're based in Tucson, Arizona.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. That way people can click and go follow you and check out everything that you're doing and the content that you're putting out. But yeah, Reid, so just closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it was something that was your biggest takeaway through your whole journey so far. But if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
One piece of advice to give people. I would say trust your gut, and as corny as it is, never give up. You got to keep doing it and trust the process. Trusting the process is something that people have a hard time doing. And, I'm learning that still myself, but trust the process.
Definitely. No, I love it, Reid. And I love your perseverance and I love your story. And I'm just excited for people just to follow you on social media, keep up with what you're doing, and just thank you. Thank you for taking time to come on.
Yeah, Dr. Casey, I couldn't thank you enough. This has been great. And again, thanks to Lindsay for setting this all up for us. It's been awesome.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Reid. He's doing such positive work, and I'm excited for you guys to follow him on social media to keep up with everything that he's doing. You can find the social media links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, their website, all of that. So all of Reid's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Reid, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. And like I spoke about in the intro, also be sure to check out my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. Each purchase of the book supports the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. You can learn more about the book and the Unlock Wellness Project on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Shop tab, then choose the Children's Book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video to learn more. If you do purchase the book, be sure to share it on social media using the hashtag UWProject. I'll repost it and give you a shout out on the podcast. But I hope you guys loved the book. Thank you so much for the support, and I hope you loved today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.